Hi guys, so it's been a while since my last video, sorry for that, but like I mentioned in the community post, I didn't forget about you. And I have great news, I can show you InstaMAT. So what is InstaMAT? InstaMAT is a material authoring and texturing tool. We can create materials with a node-based workflow, but we can also create procedural meshes, bake, optimize, UV unwrap. We can create custom image processing nodes using the nPass atom and function graph. And we can also create PBR materials from photos. And there's also material layering, a powerful way to create complicated materials from already existing ones, basically blending them in an artist-friendly way. So first things first, I think that will interest many of you. How much is it? There are actually different licensing options like a subscription, but there will be a perpetual option as well. And I think the greatest news is that you can use MAT for free when your revenue is under 100K a year. So that means you can even use it commercially for free. A small disclaimer first, I'm using an early access build, so things might change. And I'm also using a laptop currently, so there might be some fan noise now and then. Sorry for that. So, however, let's start. So, what is InstaMAT? Let's just check the UI first. We have our 3D viewport, our image viewer. We have the main window where our canvas usually is. And we have the graph object editor where you can find node settings and so on. The UI is also adjustable, so you can, for example, have the image viewer and the 3D viewport on the right. We have a menu for our assets and for everything that's included. I'm on the material library currently. And we have the package management and the viewport settings as well. So to start, let's just create a new project. And we have different project types like layering. Layering is for texturing your assets. So you can use your procedural materials directly on a 3D mesh and paint on different layers and use effects. We have material layering, which is an artist-friendly way to blend your materials. So we can create really comprehensive materials from already finished ones. We have Materialize Image, where you can create PBR materials from photos. We have the element graph, which is my favorite and where I spend most of my time. This is where you can create procedural materials, you can edit meshes, you can create meshes and objects in a procedural way. We have the nPass graph. The nPass graph is quite nice. You can create self-repeating graphs. So for example, you can create a scatter node. There's a tutorial for this, I'll show you later. We have an atom graph where you can create nodes using math nodes, and basically it's a visual programming language with a control flow and so on. So this is very sophisticated. And we have a function graph. This is a bit comparable to the atom graph, but it's meant for smaller functions that you can leverage in your atom graph, for example. So let's start a project in the element graph so I can show you the UI. At first, let's check our material library. We have a really big material library with about 1000 different materials, which you can use on your meshes. And you can also open the graphs and check them and learn from them. So there are really many. Let's take this obsidian material because I like how it looks in the viewport. We can, like you can see, we can scale all the windows. So this is our graph. We have a nice mini-map here where you can navigate in your graph easily. We can also, for example, when we are at the beginning of the graph and we want to go to the end quickly, we can either drag this or we can drag a circle here so it will jump to the end. So let's check the viewport. This is the material. We can adjust the IBL by pressing I. There's a number of IBLs which are quite nice. Let's take this Studio IBL here. So as you can see, we are using parallax occlusion here, but we can change that to tessellation. All we have to do is go to the viewport settings, scroll down. Oh, we are at the bottom already. So the displacement mode is set to parallax occlusion. We can set it to either none or to tessellation. We can adjust the tessellation factor as well as the tessellation level. We can change the mesh by pressing V on your keyboard. Let's take the sphere. We can tile the mesh by pressing either U or also here in the UI. So this is where we have a few different settings as well. We can, for example, take a snapshot and copy it to the clipboard, and we can then paste it into Paint, for example. We can focus the scene. We can do this by pressing F as well. Then we can turn on and off displacement. Ambient occlusion as well. Here is the tiling. This is mid mapping. We can toggle automatic exposure. This will adjust the exposure based on the IBL and how your scene is lit. So when we press that, it gets brighter. Can turn that off. We have different tone map operators. We can adjust the exposure here, the field of view, the hue, saturation, lightness, and the contrast. So this is quite cool for snapshots. We can choose between different drawing modes, like vertex colors, as we don't have any. This will show black. We can show a UV grid. This is quite cool when we have a custom mesh. An unlit option and solo material channel, and we can change the material channel to base color, roughness, metalness, and so on. We also have shortcuts for this, so when you are in the viewport you can just press C and switch between the different channels. By pressing M you are leaving the preview and you have your PBR material again. We can show a grid. This is also great when working with meshes. Same for the normals. We can overlay a wireframe. You can't see anything because it's displaced currently, so when we turn off the displacement, there's our wireframe. Let's turn it off. Can toggle back faces on and off. Anti-aliasing, mid-mapping, and so on. So up here we have different settings, like the execution settings, where we can change the resolution of our mesh, for example to 1K, 2K, 4K. There's also an option for 8K, but you have to enable it in the preferences first. We can choose the type to normalized 8-bit, 16-bit, full range 16-bit, full range 32-bit. We can also adjust the preview quality. We can see how much video memory we have, how much video memory is used, and we can also set a budget for the video memory. Then we have the seeds settings. So by changing the seed, the graph gets re-rendered with different seeds. We can reset to default. So these three buttons are for the canvas. And like I said, we have an adjustable UI, so you can move the viewport and the image viewer to the left. By clicking these buttons, you can view the widget in the main view, in the middle view. So 3D viewport, the image viewer, and canvas, of course. So we have a few other settings like, for example, ray tracing, or we can show an output log. We have a dope sheet where we can make animations and keyframe them, and a few other options which we won't discuss now. Let's turn that off. This is for this is a link category mode where you can, there isn't an example for this. Basically, if you have a material with different outputs like base color, normal roughness, etc., you can just connect them with just one connection, and it will automatically connect them to the corresponding inputs. But we don't need that here. So like I said, this is the graph object editor. Currently, when we click on our graph, we have the parameters for the material. But when we click on a node, for example, this blend, we can adjust the blend settings here. These are the different blend modes, the opacity, the mask mode. We can adjust the placement like stretch, aspect, fit, aspect, fill, aspect, original. So however, let's skip the element graph for now. We will return here a bit later. I'll make a small introduction to the other project types and then we come back later. So let's close this material. Let's close this unnamed element and let's choose new project. So I have something prepared for the layering already and I'll show it a bit later. Let's go to the material layering first. So the material layering project is really cool. We can use materials from the library or our custom-made materials and layer them onto each other and create more sophisticated materials and really complex ones with just a few mouse clicks. So let's see what we choose. We have the search here. Let's type in forest and let's take this forest leaves or forest soil leaves material here. We drag it into this window. Let's go back to tiling one time. And this material is already quite nice. I think the displacement is a bit too much. Let's go back to 2. And what we can do now, we can take another material and layer it on top. Let's look for mud. Let's use this mud wet fresh. Yeah, mud wet fresh. Oh, and we can also drop it directly on the mesh. So I show this. We can also drag it directly on the mesh here. Let's delete this duplicate. We have some projection options here, but for this example we don't need it. We can choose under the layer channels, we can adjust some settings like the blend offset. Blend softness, the blend softness, the contrast. We can then go to the layer element settings. So these are the exposed parameters from this material, from the mud fresh wet. So we can adjust the color, for example. Let's make it a bit darker. It's too dark maybe. We have a bunch of different settings which we won't use for now. We can go in here and click this add mask button. So we can either paint masks by hand or we can use the mesh mask builder. Let's use the mesh mask builder. So with the mesh mask builder we can adjust the mask or create the mask with different settings based on maps like the AO. Let's invert it. We can use a gradient. So here we can adjust the brightness, the contrast, etc. as well. We can use some grunges to break the effect, the mask up a bit. Let's bump up the opacity. We press on this pen and we can choose an image, a grunge. Let's take the dirt. That looks okay. We can use an additional grunge. Oops. Let's take the dirt too. Let's adjust the offset. And maybe the color again, to make it a bit darker. We can then go in and add a new layer, multi-channel layer. We go to layer channels. So we have the blend offset here again. So I'll show you how to create a water effect in a few seconds. So let's keep the blend offset like this. Let's make it shiny. Let's use a different IBL to see the reflections a bit better. There it is. Let's adjust the color to a darker color. Let's change the blend mode to screen. And then let's adjust the color to a black. And we have our water layer. We can actually go in and look for another material. Let's use some stones. That's really great about the library. We have many different materials which you can layer on top and use as is. Let's put it under the new multi-channel layer. Let's go to, we are actually in the layer settings. Let's blend it like this. Can adjust the softness. We can then go to the layer element settings and adjust this material. Let's take a darker color for the stones. Oops. That's too dark. Let's add a mask here. Again, a mesh mask builder. It's inverted. And let's just break up the material a bit with the grunge as well. Let's use spots 4 maybe. Actually, we need something more coarse for this. Let's just use a noise. Let's take a Perlin noise. Bump up the opacity. We can go to the layer settings again and adjust the offset. So that's it. We created a very sophisticated material based on 3 different materials within just a few seconds. So the next project type we will look at is the Materialize Image. So when we start the project, it asks us to select an image. Let's pick a local file. I have already prepared a photo It's this one. So we will convert this into a PBR material. So let's choose it. Then we create the project. Let's close the output log. So after clicking on create project, we already have something we could use. We have all the channels we need. So this is the PBR material. When we press C, that's our normal map, that's our height map, that's our AO, the base color, roughness, metalness, and by pressing M we go back to the full PBR image view. But we have different settings here to make it even better. We can, for example, adjust the base color with AO darkening. We can sharpen up the base color. We can use a different hue, adjust the saturation. The luminosity. We have the possibility to do shadow cancellations. We can also make it seamless when we press U and tile the material. You can see we have a seam there. But when we go to input seamless and enable it, we have different options like image based. So with just a click, it's already seamless. And we can adjust some things like the mask size. The mask softness. Mask softness curve. Warp intensity. And here we have much more settings for the normal intensity. We can adjust the low frequencies, the medium frequencies, the high frequencies, and so on. We can adjust our height. So when we preview the height channel and decrease this, you can see how it sharpens up or gets softer. We can add some dirt on top. So this is AO based, so we need to adjust the AO setting intensity. So let's bump it up a bit. And as you can see, we are getting some nice dirt in the crevices. Can adjust the color. Can just pick a color from here maybe and make it darker so it fits the material better. There is this height intensity setting, so it will be actually visible in the height map. Can bump it up to 100, so it's really extreme, or lower it down to 0. We can use the grunge to get more surface dirt. Can also adjust the intensity. Let's go back to tiling 1. We can add dust. That's the same principle here. We need to bump up the AO intensity and can also bump up the normal intensity as well. I think we have too much displacement. Let's go to 1. Might be a bit too bright. So yeah, we have a bunch of different settings, but I think it's enough for a short showcase. And yeah, this is how you can create nice materials from images in just a few seconds. And it's also procedural, so we can change the seed, for example, and we will get different effects. So yes, let's jump to the next project type, which is the nPass element graph. For the nPass project and atom and function, we won't dig too deep into it as it's really complicated and too much for this introduction here. But to just show you some of the possibilities, we opened the project type and we have already 2 nodes in it. Actually, let's just open the tutorial. So we go to our graph library and go to tutorials, nPass, and we have a nice scatter tutorial here. So if you're interested in this is really powerful and you can create really awesome nodes. This here is a simple scatter. You have a description for what is done and why. So basically this transform node here applies a different transform in each pass for this input, and then these output will be blended with the buffer, so the last iteration's output. So this is just a simple scatter, but for a tutorial it's quite nice, so you get those descriptions and can learn from it and make your own self-repeating nodes. So let's start a new project, the atom graph. So I think this will be best to also show you some example, as many nodes are made with the atom graph. Like, let's take a really complicated one. It would be the mesh render node. So this is a node where you can input a mesh and it will get rendered. So we can use the mesh shape generator. And this node will generate a mesh, like for example in a UV sphere, we can input it into the mesh render node. So when we change the type to a cylinder, for example, it renders the cylinder. We can rotate and transform the mesh here. We can also add a material. Let's go to the library. Let's just use this. And here we can actually use the link category mode as an example. So when we choose the link category mode, all those categories will be easy to connect to all those inputs. So we select this and input it here. We can adjust the height factor in the node itself. The mesh is not really tessellated much, so we can bump it up a bit. Just decrease the height. Okay. Adjust the radius. We can view the output in the image viewer. So, however, actually this node, when we press right click and go to open graph, this node is actually built using the different project types. Like this here is the element graph layer, so it's based on this mesh render node. When we open this one, it's actually the atom graph. So yeah, this is quite overwhelming now, but I just want to show you the possibilities, so you can basically create a sophisticated renderer and much more. Let's close all those tabs. Don't save. Go to element graph again. And yeah, most of the nodes, like the noises as well, They are created using the atom graph. So this is a Perlin noise created in the atom graph. Let's see, fractal sum. This is created with the atom graph as well. And yeah, this is really powerful, and I didn't have really much time to dig in deeper into this, but it's great. You can build really great nodes, image processing nodes, and also like you could see the mesh render node and so on. So I think for many of you, especially all the programmers, this will be really great to use. As I'm not a programmer, I did not really use this much, but yeah, it's really awesome. And like I said, most of the nodes are built this way, and I'm really curious to see what you guys will come up with. I actually think the nPass graph, the nPass project, the atom project, and the function project are one of the most awesome features of InstaMAT, and I really would like to spend more time in it. And the possibilities are basically endless, so you can create really great stuff in here. Like mentioned a few times, most of the library is made this way. Many of the nodes, the noises, etc. are made with the atom graph, the function graph, and the nPass graph. So yeah, I'm really curious what you guys will come up with. So now let's take a look into the element graph again. We create a new project, element graph. Actually, let's close all of those tabs first. This as well, and go to the plus element graph. And yeah, let's create a small material, a really short one, to show you the workflow. Let's take the brick generator node. So with this node you can basically generate the basic shapes for bricks and tiles and so on. So we have many nice settings like the bevel variance. We can also adjust the mode to herringbone, diamond. There are some really great patterns to get you started for a material. Let's take the default one for now. Let's set the bevel variance to 0. The bevel to 0 as well. Let's go to size and let's increase the gap size. Oh, that's the variance, sorry. And also let's set the node to grayscale. Let's adjust the count, like so. Maybe let's use 4 by 10, or let's use 6 by 12. Let's use the flood fill output. So we already get a flood fill output here. And let's use flood fill to random color. Let's set this to grayscale as well. Let's use flood fill to gradient with angle variance set to 1. And when we hold Alt and click the node and hold LMB, we can just duplicate the node. Like you could see, the seed changed as well. We still have the link category mode turned on. Let's do this 3 times. Then let's blend those together using a minimum blend node. Let's do that as well. Then let's multiply the random color node into this. So how can we now visualize what we have here? As you can see, in this 3D viewport you can't see nothing. We need to set up the outputs, and when we drag a connection from here and type in height and go here to expose height as graph output. We already have our height. Then we need a normal. We drag an output here and use the height to normal. Then again, drag the connection and expose normal as graph output. We'll need a solid color node for the roughness and metalness. Let's expose this as roughness. Let's use white so we don't get any reflections. This will be the metalness output. Then we need an AO, height to ambient occlusion. Let's type in ambient occlusion and expose this. And we need a color as well, a solid color. Let's take, I don't know, maybe a blue hue. And we expose this as base color. So we have all our channels set up. We can rename this to a material so it will work in the link category mode. So this was a small issue, but this is fixed in newer builds already, so you can generally just double click and edit. We can take this and blend it over this. And use just actually we just need this for the color. But let's use a slope blur with a turbulent Perlin noise so we get a bit of distortion. And let's jump into the slope blur so we can preview the image. And what we can do on the slope blur, we can change the intensity, we can blur our input for softer effects, we can invert the direction, we can change the mode. Let's take minimum. Then we can blend this over, and by pressing Ctrl and dragging this output, we can just input it here into this output and we get our effect. We can also use a mask to not have all of the tiles distorted. Let's use a histogram edit node. Let's adjust the master slider and the contrast. And let's input it into the opacity mask of the blend node. Actually, we don't have a background, so we need to connect this. We can invert the mask within the blend node. So let's say this is our material. We can choose a different color for the gaps by, let's take an HCl node and decrease the luminosity to a dark blue. Let's blend it with the initial shape and let's use Actually, let's use this and use the grayscale to mask node. Then we'll use this as opacity mask. We need to invert the mask here, and to only get the gaps we adjust the threshold like so. We can use the flat filter random color as a mask again. And an HCL node again. Let's decrease the luminosity again a bit and input it into the foreground. So we have a different color for each tile. We can use grunge for the roughness. Let's search for grunge and let's use the artistic tool. We can just input it into the roughness and we get some nice reflections. So this was a fast and easy to make material, not the best one, but I think for a simple showcase it's enough. And in the next step we will use the custom made material and layer it on a rock mesh made in ZBrush. So let's make a small example where we expose some parameters and add the material to our user library so we can use it whenever we want to. So this is a custom material I made a while ago. And yeah, this is the graph. So let's say we want to make a parameter for those directional cracks, so we can either turn them on or turn them off, or decrease and increase the intensity of them. So the nodes that are responsible for those are those nodes are warping the base shape with the tile scatter output. So currently the intensity of this directional warp node is set to 0.05. This is set to 0.09, but we want to have one parameter for those, and it should go from 0 to 1. So we'll use the float node first. It starts at 0 and it goes to 0.05. We need a second one, which starts at 0 and goes to 0.09. We click Alt and drag the node so we can multiply it. We just change this value here. By dragging a connection from that X, we can expose X as a graph input, but we can also name it already. So we name it horizontal cracks. And we also input it into this float node. We take our result from the first one, go over this expand button and put it into intensity. The second one goes to the second node. And as we already see, the warping is gone. It's just the cracks. So what we also are doing, we are multiplying it here, I think. No, sorry. We do the multiply here. This goes to 7.89%. So we use another float node and 7.89% are 0.0789. We can, from the graph object editor, we can take this parameter and drag it into the scene. So we can input it here again. then the lerp float into the blend node. And what we are also doing here is we are blending the cracks into this node. So we need another lerp float node. It's 6905. So it's 6905. We'll take the horizontal cracks parameter again and drag it into the scene. And into the blend node it goes. So there's another blend happening somewhere. It should be, yeah, it's this one. It's just 100% blend, so we don't need a lerp float node, just the parameter. We drag it, we put it into the opacity output, and we have another one somewhere. Ah, it's those, okay. So it's a bit more complicated. I should have taken a simpler scene. But like this, you can see the possibilities, so it's nice to. So this is 305, 305. We duplicate it again, and the next one is 738. 73088. And we can just use this one. And it goes here. And into this one. So as you can see, those cracks are fully gone. And when we use this parameter, we change the control type to a percentage slider. So we can go from 0% to 100%. And when we use it, you can see it cracking and warping. So when we instance this node now, this material, sorry, to do this, we just click on this plus. We choose element graph, go to our package editor and drag the node in. We can preview it as a 3D material. And we, sorry, I didn't save it. So now it's saved and the parameter is here, so we can just use it. Yes, nice. So we can set this graph to private, so it won't appear on the library when we use it. So we just have the template graph, and to have it visible in the library, you have to pay attention. You should name it. You should name it properly, and you should also set the category starting with materials / and then you can just write something, whatever you want, basically. So if you want to have a stones category, you just use materials, stones, and XXX, so whatever you want. When you include this to the library, then InstaMAT will automatically create a category for you, but this one goes to rock and cliff. So let's save it. Let's name this one. Sorry, we have to go to edit and to canvas and create template from instance. So we name it harsh mountain rock. And yeah, a description, I don't know. It's just a test. So this is a harsh mountain rock material. Click OK. We can delete the unnamed element and we can save the package. So let's close SMAT for now. So to have it appear in the library, you have to put the IML file into users documents InstaMAT Studio library. So this is it. Just copy it over. Then we'll start InstaMAT again. So let's create another project, an element graph. And now when we use quick search and type in hash, it already appears. Preview as is it. Preview it as a 3D material. And our parameter is here as well. So this is it. And the next step, we will be using this material on a sculpted rock from ZBrush. So I show you how to import the mesh into MAT, then generate a low poly and bake the high poly details into the low poly, and then we can start layering. In the next step, let's see how we can prepare a high poly mesh for texturing. So I made this rock in ZBrush. It has about 1.77 million polygons, so it's quite high poly, quite dense mesh. Let's close this for now, as I already exported it. So now we will create a low poly mesh from a high poly mesh using a node-based approach with MAT's element graph and end up with a game-ready asset. So let's start a new project. We take the element graph. So the first thing we have to do, we have to import our high poly mesh into InstaMAT. So we just drag and drop it into the canvas and copy it to package. It will appear in the package manager under assets. It will load a while as this is quite high poly, like mentioned. So let's wait a bit. So what we will do now, we will voxelize the mesh, then we will optimize it, UV unwrap it, and we will bake the height details to the low poly mesh. In the end, we will end up with a normal map for the mesh, and we will be able to use it for texturing. So after the mesh is loaded, it appears under meshes. We can just drag and drop it into the canvas. To preview it, we just click on the output pin. So here it is. It's the same one as in ZBrush. So first we will use the mesh voxelize node. Voxelization will give us a nice even topology. So when we preview this one, you can see it's way too low poly. The resolution is set to 16. We will use something like, I don't know, 60 maybe. Yeah, that looks quite good, and we can always preview our topology. So under the settings, we go to wireframe overlay and turn it on. So this is our current topology. The initial mesh, the high poly, looks like this. So it's already triangulated. So to get an even more optimized mesh with a lower resolution, we will use the mesh optimize node. Let's set the feature importance to highest. So these settings will likely depend on the mesh you have. Some will work with lower settings, some need higher settings. And the percent triangles is the value we are decreasing the polygon count. So currently it's at 50%. So when we preview this, we already have a quite low poly result, but we will go even lower. So let's use maybe 0.25. Yeah, this looks nice. So now we can UV unwrap it with the UV unwrap node. For this node we have some settings as well, like the strategy, auto, hard surface axial, hard surface angle, organic. We'll stay with auto. So now we can bake our mesh. We will use the mesh bake node. We'll put the UV unwrapped mesh into the target mesh input and the initial high poly into the source mesh. And the bake node is quite nice. We can bake out different maps like the normal tangent, normal world, ID map, vertex color, AO, and so on. We'll just need the normal tangent for now, and let's take the AO as well. So as preview we have still our unwrapped mesh. You can't see anything from the bake. Let's turn off the wireframe node. So this is still the initial mesh. But when we right click on the mesh bake node and go to preview as material channel, mesh normal tangent and use normal tangent space, we'll get our preview. So this is still the low poly mesh, but with our baked normal details. So that was quite fast, and the preview is set to 4K. Let's use 2K. So now if we want to export the mesh and the maps, we just drag a connection from the UV unwrap node, and let's call it rock LP, and then we click on expose rock LP as graph input. We will do the same for the normal map. Let's call it just normal. And for the AO as well, ambient occlusion. So now we can export our maps as our bake is already finished, the mesh is optimized. So we go to File, Export Image and Data Outputs. We can choose our output path, the file format, so it's currently the graph name, the output name, and the format width and height. Actually, at first, let's rename the project to rock. The category can stay like it is. So again, export image and data outputs. We use TIFF as the format for the normal map and the AO. And mesh file format will be FBX, but we have quite many to choose from. Same for the image formats. Yeah, then we just go to export. So InstaMAT will render the graph first and then export the outputs. It's already done. So now to texture our mesh, we go to the plus again and we choose the layering project. We'll choose our mesh, our newly created rock LP FBX. So this is the low poly. We create the project. So here it is. Then we need to import our maps into the package. So we go to the package management and import the AO and the normal map. Just drag and drop it. We go back to our layering project, and under material sections we'll choose the normal tangent. This is our normal map. And the AO, it's here. And it's ready to be textured. It's still our low poly version with all the nice details baked in. So for texturing, we'll choose our previous material first, the harsh mountain rock. We'll drag and drop it either on the mesh itself, or we can just drop it here. There it is. So we can now click the material and go to the projection settings. We can adjust the scale. So these are the different axes. We can lock the lock and it will scale evenly across all of the axes. Let's see what we'll use. Yeah, this looks quite fine. We can go to the layer channels and increase or decrease the normal intensity. As we made some parameters for the horizontal cracks, we can turn them on and off. Let's turn them off maybe a little bit. Like so. So now let's take material from the library. We'll search for moss and we'll take this moss material here, drag and drop it. So what we can do now, we can add a mask. So when we click on the harsh mountain rock, we can go to add mask and add mesh mask painting. We can subtract it. So InstaMAT will give us many options for the brush settings, like the radius, the fall off, spacing, the flow, rotation as well, path oriented. We have some dynamic settings like the size, like so maybe, the flow as well, rotation, position. We can also adjust the brush softness curve, stroke width. We can of course also use some custom made brushes, but this one will do it for now. So we can now just start painting our mask. So apply a bit moss to the crevices. We can decrease and increase the radius with this parameter, but we can also hold control in the 3D viewport and then hold the left mouse button and move your mouse up and down. So we can increase by moving the mouse up and decrease the size by moving the mouse down. And of course InstaMAT has full tablet support, so you can use your tablet and things like pressure sensitivity will work, etc. But instead of painting the mask by hand, we can also choose a procedural approach. We just need the mesh mask builder, so you click on the add mask button and go to mesh mask builder. We can invert it here. Then we can apply the details by using different material channels like the AO. As the AO is not really strong, the effect is not that strong. So let's use the gradient option. So we can apply our gradient, so the moss is growing from top to bottom. We can also invert it, so we can let the moss grow from bottom to top. We can adjust the gradient with brightness settings, for example, or contrast and balance. We can also use the curvature map, so we get some moss growing in the small crevices. So again, we have all the settings like brightness, contrast, balance, and so on. We can use the direction setting, which will increase the strength of the directionality a bit. We can also use some grunges to break the effect up a bit. So we go to grunge and increase the opacity. Then we can choose an image by clicking on the pen. And let's take the burnt grunge maybe. When we set the opacity to negative ranges, we get a subtract. And again, we can adjust the seed, the balance, contrast, so we get a much nicer and smoother effect. And we can also use the secondary grunge. Let's take spot 6 maybe. And also go with some negative ranges, so we subtract the moss a bit. So those grunges are the same grunges that you can use in the canvas when creating materials, so you have the same settings here as well. This means you can also make your own grunges and noises and use them here. Let's go to the direction again to increase the visibility a bit, and maybe to the gradient. So yeah, we just textured a quite nice looking rock. It's game ready in just about a few minutes. We could go on and use more layers of materials and effects and some hand painting maybe, but for this tutorial this should be enough. And again, we still have our low poly mesh. We can also preview it in 4K. So it's resolving much more details and the textures are much sharper. Yeah, looks quite nice. So that's it for now. I hope I could give you a small insight into InstaMAT and its features. And I hope you enjoyed it and are as excited as me for the release. So the release is on January the 24th, so this Wednesday. And yeah, you can download it and check it yourself. You can check the website at instamaterial.com and also check the YouTube channel. I will link both in the description below. And if you have any questions, let me know. I try to answer what I can. So see you next time.